Good morning. I'm by myself this week because I was preaching for another pastor while they were on vacation, so I wasn't able to meet with the group at church. So I'm doing this at my home in my office so that you'll have it for this week's study. The scripture this week comes from the Gospel of Luke, the 5th chapter, the first 11 verses. And this is the story of Jesus coming to the Sea of Galilee and getting into a boat that's there. There are some fishermen there, according to Luke, and Jesus gets into one of their boats, happens to be Peter, and tells him to put out to sea because the crowd is pressing in. And he wants to be able to teach them. And so Peter becomes captive to Jesus's preaching, sitting there in the boat while Jesus is standing addressing the crowd. There are a number of things that stand out in this story that I wanted to bring to your attention that as I was doing the research as to the scenes behind the scenes, so to speak. The setting, the Sea of Galilee, which is known by 3 different names. It's also called the Sea of Tiberias and Lake Gennesaret, are 3 names that are biblical names that are put to the same body of water. It is 13 miles long and 8 miles wide. It is unique in that it sits 680 feet below sea level. And as a result of this, it creates an almost tropical environment around the lake. In Jesus' time, it was very populous. There were numerous cities, population centers around the lake. It's not so populous today as it was in Jesus' time. The boats that were used there, the fishing boats, were not much bigger, from what I've been able to discern, not much bigger than rowboats. They typically had a sail on them, although they were also rowed. But it was big enough that, according to the scripture and pictures that depict this scene, show Jesus standing in the boat and Peter sitting there, probably with the oars keeping the boat in a steady position in relation to the crowd. It's interesting to me in that the characters of this scripture, you have Jesus and you have Peter, and you also have James and John, who are sons of Zebedee, who owns the fishing, a salt fish business that they're working with. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, are cousins of Jesus. Their mother and Mary, the mother of Jesus, were sisters. So that makes these first cousins that would have known each other outside of the ministry of Jesus. Peter, it seems, was either a partner or an employee of Zebedee. He's referred to both ways in Scripture, and it's hard to get a feel for which way that would play out there. But that Peter was also fishing with them, either as a partner or as an employee, a subcontractor, maybe, if you will, of Zebedee, working together there. They had been fishing and had not caught anything. And then Jesus, after he finishes preaching, tells them to throw down the nets again, that they're going to catch the fish. And they do, and they have fish so plentiful that the nets almost break, and they fill 2 boats. They call Peter calls to his partners. He refers to James and John here as partners, and they come and they fill that boat and together. And Peter responds to Jesus that he says, "Get away from me, for I'm a sinful man." And Jesus says, "No, come and follow me, and I'll make you fishers of people." In researching this, I find that something that I'd always suspected, but I had never found anybody else that had researched it and had the documentation, if you will, to back this up. But that when Peter follows Jesus, that this wasn't as spontaneous as it seems in Scripture. That Peter had known Jesus in his ministry for some time, and he was responding to him over a period of time there, that he had become a witness to the preaching and the ministry and what God was doing through his son, Jesus the Christ. There is a reference in John, in 1 John, the 35th to the 42nd verses, that have disciples of John the Baptist coming to Jesus or seeing Jesus and acknowledging that he is the Christ. One of those disciples was Andrew, Peter's brother, and he goes to Peter and tells him that the one they've been waiting for has come, that it is this Jesus, who is Jesus of Nazareth. Now, this event takes place about a year before, if you take the chronological evidence that's around the passage in John and transpose it, that you come up with this, that this meeting took place about a year before this instance in the Gospel of Luke. So Peter had had time to digest what he was seeing in the ministry of Jesus prior to this invitation to just pick up and follow him. James and John, I don't have that same kind of evidence there, but that's what I'd always felt, and now I see that there is some evidence to support this, at least where Peter is concerned here. This is also a turning point in Jesus's ministry, as Luke records it. And Luke states that he is set out to make an orderly account of this ministry. And so I interpret that Luke is probably as close to a chronological ordering of the ministry of Jesus as we have. Although I would not say that he is without, or that he has it all nailed down in his accounting there. But prior to this, Jesus' ministry has been in the synagogues, of going wherever he was and going into the synagogues and teaching there in the synagogues. And very quickly, this was going to be cut off to him, and was cut off as an avenue of reaching the people. But this is sort of a turning point, at least the way that Luke records it, where Jesus moves from the synagogues out into where the people are, wherever they gather. And the way the Gospels write the story, it seems that wherever Jesus went, the people gathered around him, that they flocked to him because of the reputation that he was having there. And that's what's happened here in this story that Luke records, that Jesus has come to this fishing village, and the people are surrounding him, and in order to be able to speak to a large group of them, he gets into Peter's boat and has him back out into the water so that he can address the crowd. Now, water seems to make a excellent soundboard to carry sound across. So you have the people who would have been up on the bank around the lake, and you have Jesus out there in the boat. And so it's sort of a natural amphitheater there for Jesus to be heard as he's teaching the people there. But it's at this point, like I said, there's evidence that Peter had made this acquaintance with Jesus sometime before, about a year before. But it's this invitation that prompts Peter to act upon the invitation. He's not going to sit there idly by on the fence, so to speak, keeping one foot on each side, continuing to fish, observing what Jesus is doing, following Jesus to a certain extent as he's able to, but also continuing to life as usual. But from this point on, things change. Jesus tells Peter, I'm going to make you a fisher of people. And so Peter, as it's recorded in Luke, left his nets, left his boat, and went and started following Jesus. Luke says they left them. So the assumption there, given the relationship with James and John and Zebedee, is that James and John also left to follow him. But not necessarily, because there were other disciples that were also fishermen. And so it's hard to pin that down since Luke doesn't name them there. He just says that they left and followed Jesus from that time on. So there you have it. There's more in this passage that meets the eye. We tend to focus, I think, sometimes on the fact that Jesus pointed out where the fish were, and that they threw the net and were able to catch the fish. The fish in the Sea of Galilee tend to flock or stay together in schools. I know the Manhattan fishery in the Chesapeake Bay and out into the ocean along the coast there, that they use an airplane to fly over in front of the boat to spot the schools of fish, that they're observable from the air, and that they direct the fishing boat and their nets to where the fish are. One explanation for what happened here is that Jesus was able to see where the fish were. See, he's standing up in the boat. The others are sitting down and telling them where to cast their nets in order to where the school of fish is. That's not to take away the miracle that they caught so many fish. It's just simply to say that Jesus could see things that other people might not see because they weren't looking for them. But we tend to focus on catching the fish. And really, I think we ought to be focusing on that Peter and the others have been around the edges, and now Jesus is calling them to action. It's time to put up or shut up, so to speak, and they decide that they're going to go all in and become followers of Jesus and become an active part of his ministry from this time on. Well, I hope that you've enjoyed this. If you, like I said, if you go and look at that passage in Gospel of John, chapter 35 and 42, and then go back in Matthew and Mark and look at the references there to the calling of the 12 disciples, along with this passage in Luke, and just try to put them together and to think about what you're seeing there, and the fact that they weren't much different than you and I, that being confronted with Jesus and his ministry, that it would take, I won't say persuasion, but it would take more than this initial meeting to just turn your back on everything that was your world and go all in with Jesus. We tend to take time to come to that. I know that's certainly been true in my life. Although there did come a time when it's time to go all in. And that was the calling into pastoral ministry that I struggled with for at least 5 years consciously, and probably ever since I was a teenager subconsciously, and before making that decision that it's time to go all in. Well, I look forward to seeing you in worship later on this morning as Pastor Dawn carries this forward in the last of this Faith, Trust, and Pixie Dust sermon series. So may God's blessing be upon you.